Okay, a little more about what is the product backlog. So, oops. It's this thing here. Yeah. Ordered lists of everything that might be needed. Single source of requirements for any change. And it can contain stuff like features, functions, requirements, enhancements, fixes, bugs, anything you want to change about the software to improve it. Often it's expressed as something called user stories. Yeah. So the ordering is important. I mean, again, you should look at this. This is not a specific requirements list. It's just a very sort of loose description of what we want how we want to improve the software, what we want it to do. And the ordering is important because when we get to the sprint planning, the team needs to know what is the client's preference, what has the most value for the person we are doing this for, and this is what the ordering reflects. So the most important items for the client are always at the top, and usually you should start working on those because that's how you can create the most value. And this is the single source of requirements for any change. So any change to the software must be done because it's listed in the product backlog. So this is also to ensure that that you are doing the right thing. You're doing something of value to the client or who owns the project. And it can be anything. So features is the most normal thing. Like you want a new feature, you write it on the product backlog. The software should be able to do this. But it's also stuff like bug fixes and any kind of change to the software. Everything, all this stuff has to go on the product backlog. User stories, will not go so much into that. You can read that yourself if you want. It's quite simple. It's just a good way to express points. So you kind of write a little story that's seen from the perspective of the user of this particular feature. So what the user would see when this feature is done. It's a good way to express product backlog items. And it is the product owner who is solely responsible for maintaining this. So this one guy is or girl should be the one who's always changing it. It shouldn't be changed by anyone else but the product owner. And the product owner is also who you ask if you are at any point in doubt about what to do. Write that here. Is responsible. Content, availability, ordering. The other major point I would like to make about this is that refinement happens just in time. and this is where it really deviates from specifications, because a specification is something where you try to refine as much as possible up front. In Agile, this is a bad idea. You should only refine stuff when you absolutely need to, because if you do it too early, then stuff might change in reality. That means the refinement is useless. So when you want to start working, then of course you have to refine some of the items. You have something that's described very broadly, like a piece of software should have some broad feature. Of course, you have to decide exactly what it should be to ask a programmer to write the functionality, but you don't do that too early. That's the point. I've got to save the other one. I should do that. Okay. Just a few more to go. A very important concept to know about when you are working with a product backlog is something called the definition of done. I have another way of expressing this, which is quality is not a variable. Let me grab this product backlog snippet again. Yeah, the thing is that at this point where we plan the sprint, you select from the product backlog, usually the top. So what you're actually doing is you're selecting some items selected for sprint to be turned into potentially shippable product increment. Let's say that that we chose a few of these items. So to say that we chose these. That's not a good color. This one, maybe a little thicker. So maybe we chose these for our sprint, these 5 bricks, these 5 product backlog items. And choosing them means that during the sprint, the plan is to turn these ideas into something that is potentially shippable product increments. Now, in order to do that, we have to agree on this. We have to agree on what do we mean when we say potentially shippable product increment. So when is it done? And that can be a tricky question to answer, because when is software done? I mean, what is the quality of the software? So we can write some code and maybe check that it works, and that could be done. Or we could say that that's not enough. We have to have someone test it and check that it actually works. Maybe someone else, and we have to maybe write some unit tests for it. That could be another definition of done. So every project, every team usually has a different definition of done. And you need to think carefully about that, because it impacts a lot how much work you can do. Because the higher quality you want, the longer time it's going to take to get there. Like testing takes time, and fixing bugs and stuff like that takes time. So it depends on the needs of the project, of course. But the important thing that you can't do is to have this as a variable. That's come in. So this is a no-no in Agile. You don't have quality as a variable. So you have to decide up front, because it's also a promise you make to the customer. You agree with the customer on that. And what is it we're delivering in terms of quality? So usually Scrum teams actually have a small piece of text that is their definition of done, and they try to elaborate it as much as possible. and usually keep that during the project. Okay. Final thing. Something called pigs and chickens. A little cartoon. This one. Where did it go? No. Yeah, so Pig and the chicken, who are friends, they want to open a restaurant together, and it's going to be called Ham and Eggs. But when the pig hears this title, it sort of backs out of the plan and says it's not really interested because it can see there's a certain asymmetry in this relationship, and that's because the chicken, of course, has to lay the eggs, but it's the pig's own bacon which is being served at the restaurant. And this illustrates the difference between people who are developing a software product and those who are sort of around the software product, who are stakeholders in it. So we call the developers, the development team, we call those pigs. And we call everyone else that is interested in the project, involved in the project, a chicken. And the idea of Scrum, basically, you could say, is to protect the pigs from the chickens. So this doesn't happen. Because when you are in a project, when you're working on it, then you are committed to it. You have a different commitment to it because you're using your time on it. You have some stakeholders. They are like chickens. I mean, they can have a lot of opinions about what should be done, but it's not their bacon that's frying when the customers comes in. So they have a fundamentally different relationship to the project. And a lot of the rules in Scrum are actually about keeping the chickens out of the project. They should be there, of course. They should be there at the appropriate time and to say the appropriate things, but they should not be there all the time. So you have like a software company where you have a Scrum team that's working on something, and then maybe you have a manager who is the boss of those people who are working on the team. This manager is a chicken in this idea, and what will often happen is that this manager can suddenly want to have the developers work on something that he needs all of a sudden in the middle of a sprint, and this is not very good for the process. If this happens a lot, because it sort of goes across what is the sprint goals. But because he's the manager, they can't say no to him. So that's why we have a Scrum Master. So we have a guy who has to go up to the manager and say, you can't do that. If you want us to work on something, we can put it in the next sprint. You can put it in the product backlog, and we can do that. But you cannot tell my developers to work on something else now. And this would be the Scrum Master's job in this case. Yeah. Okay. Enough about